everybody. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us on CELPIP Live this week. Have you wondered if there is more than one good way to respond to a speaking test? Or are you just generally curious about the strategies our test takers employ to get their desired level? Well, let's find out today. If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome to our channel. CELPIP will be going live every Tuesday and Friday at 9:30 a.m. PST. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and also give us a thumbs up if you find this video useful. I will be going over CELPIP news updates towards the end, but for now, we will be going straight to our Ask the Expert segment, where Brandy will be analyzing speaking section responses. Okay, so I will just welcome Brandy in a moment, but if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please ask them in the comments below. Hi, Brandy. How was your weekend?
Hi, Ashwati. My weekend was great, thank you. With Mother's Day and the nice weather out, I can't complain. Were you able to talk to your mom over the weekend as well?
Yes, I was. Actually, this lockdown has been helping me because I'm able to call my mother more often and stay in touch. So that's a nice plus.
Yes, absolutely. It was great.
Okay, thanks. So what I'm going to do now is just let you get on with your presentation. I don't want to, take up any more time. We have quite a few people waiting.
Sure. Excellent. Okay, let's get started. I'm just going to share my screen, everybody. If you could give me just a moment to do that. All right. Okay, so welcome again to our second speaking response analysis episode then. So what I'm going to do with all of us today is I'm going to start off with just giving a very brief overview of what the raters are listening for when you give your speaking responses, because it's really important that we all clearly understand the skills that we need to demonstrate in order to receive our leveled score on the test. So once we've got a clear understanding of those performance standards, we're going to listen to two different speaking responses that were given by past test takers. And these two test takers will have answered the same question from the test. They both achieved the same score on the test. They're both level 9 test takers. But what we really want to do is have a close look at the strengths and weaknesses of each response. And then we're going to compare those responses together so we can clearly see exactly how it is the scores were earned. So the first thing raters are going to be listening for as you give your response is the content and the coherence of the response. So they're looking for the number of main ideas that you present, and we really want to make sure that you have lots of examples and supporting details to fully discuss the ideas in your response itself. This will improve the quality of the answer and make it much more interesting and much more in-depth. Your ideas should be organized so that it's very clear how they connect one to the other, and all of your details should unify or support the main idea of the entire piece. This is what we mean by coherence. So your details must be relevant, but they must also connect one to the other, and the whole piece will sound as one final response. The second thing that raters will look at the response is your vocabulary. So your word choice, of course, has to be interesting, descriptive, and precise. You want to show off your best vocabulary to maximize your score, but you need to make sure that your vocabulary choice is suitable for the task. All right, this is what we mean by context specific. So all the words there need to address the question and make sense within the framework of the answer. The words you choose as well should be varied. We definitely don't want to just repeat the same word or phrase all the way through. We want to, again, show off our vocabulary with a range of vocabulary words, but we're really striving for accuracy. So as you're practicing and developing your vocabulary skills at home, really focus in on your collocations, which are different combinations of words that you put together to express an idea, and also your synonyms. So arming yourself with this extended vocabulary going into the test will help you along to showcase your vocabulary skills. Your listenability is key for any speaking response, of course, because this is how well you're pronouncing your words and speaking with fluency so that the listener can understand what you're saying. So we're hoping that we're able to determine, when your first idea is ending and the next idea is beginning again. So you're doing this with intonation, with the voice sort of naturally rising and falling. We don't want to pause for too long or correct ourselves over and over again within a response. We also don't want to interject constantly. So if we're always stopping in the middle of a thought to say, gee, it's really distracting for your listener, and it tends to cause frustration because we lose the flow of the piece. So try to speak from beginning to end all the way through with minimal pauses and interjections. Try not to stop and start again, otherwise that will confuse your listener. Now, your grammar component, your sentence structure is really important here too in listenability. So even though you're speaking, we still need to hear complete sentence structure. So we don't want to just learn short and simple phrases, right? If we just spoke in short, simple phrases all the way through the response, you'll find that your response is a little more simplistic. So we should really be learning compound and complex sentence structures and practicing using those structures correctly within the response. You can even start using compound complex structures. So it's really a variety of structures that the raters will be most impressed by there, if you can, again, do so accurately and precisely. Task fulfillment is the last dimension that raters are going to listen for. So they're really wanting to double check that you have fully answered the question on the test. So are all your details relevant? And did you completely discuss them? Are they all very clearly connected back to that main opinion rather? Your tone is always important. So, if you're trying to persuade somebody something, are you using a respectful tone and still speaking with confidence, that kind of thing. And the length of your response is also important. So keep an eye on your timer as you're recording. If you're asked to speak for 90 seconds, then you want to get fairly close to that 90-second mark without getting cut off or without having too much time to spare. Now, raters aren't looking for perfection. So if you're cut off right in the middle of your concluding statement, it's not a huge problem, but you don't ever want to get cut off at the middle of a main point, or you don't want to leave, say, 20 seconds of time at the end where you're not speaking at all. So do keep an eye on the timer as you're giving your response, because the raters will note that as well. So with all four of these dimensions, it's really important to note that they're all going to be important on the CELPIP test. So the raters are looking for a combination of all of these skills as they give you your score on that response. So at home, as you're practicing, please do develop your skills in each of these areas. So make sure you're able to give your main point and lots of detail, develop that vocab, practice your pronunciation and your speech skills, and time yourself at home too, so that you're sure to fill that speaking time. We have to practice all four of these skills together in order to maximize our performance on the test. It's a package deal. So with that in mind, then, you can imagine we each have our own strengths and weaknesses. Some of us are really strong public speakers, while others of us might have really strong vocabulary, but we don't speak quite as fluently. So there are really many different ways to achieve the same level on the CELPIP test when we look at the specific combination of skill set that you bring to the test. So for example, let's say we have two different responses that are answering the exact same question, and our first response has fantastic ideas that are very well developed and easily connected to the main point. The vocabulary as well would be very specific to the task. But let's say that this test taker has a little bit of trouble with their fluency. Maybe there are lots of interjections and lots of self-corrections, and perhaps they don't quite fill the speaking time. They finish a little early. Now let's pretend that the second test taker comes right behind him, and this test taker demonstrates fluent pronunciation and very strong delivery skills. Rhythm is flawless. But maybe this test taker has some great ideas, but they're not quite as fully developed or not quite as well connected one to the other. The vocabulary for the second speaker might be specific in some cases, but there might also be evidence of some very vague and general terms being used. And perhaps this test taker gets cut off at the end of the response. And that's the response that's submitted to the test. So even within these dimensions, with different strengths and different weaknesses, it is still very possible for each of these test takers to achieve the same level score on the CELPIP test. So we know that there are 12 levels in total for CELPIP, and we're going to focus today on level 9. So level 9 suggests that a speaker can demonstrate effective proficiency at work and in the community and at home. So really what a level 9 speaker can accomplish then is that the details they're including within their responses are showing evidence of complexity. The grammar structures too, so all of your sentence structures are also starting to show some complex ideas. And the vocabulary is becoming more noticeably precise too. We've got more evidence here of context-specific vocabulary. Now you'll note that a level 9 speaker might still have a few mistakes. So we might have some word choice or grammar errors. There might be the odd grammar or pronunciation error, but these mistakes overall will not affect the overall comprehension of the piece. So they might be noticeable, but you'll still understand exactly what it is that these level 9 speakers are communicating. So again, we know that the 2 responses that we're listening to today each earned a level 9. So we're not trying to assess the level today in the scored responses that we're listening to. Instead, what we're going to do is look at the specific strengths and weaknesses within each of those responses. So the example that we're using today is from a past CELPIP test. This was task 7 on the test. And task 7 always asks us to express our opinions. So the question that our 2 test takers are answering today reads like this. Do you think that nowadays people spend too much time on their cell phones? Explain your reasons. So as we listen to this response, I've included a copy of your transcript. And please know, I want you to note that you're never going to hear or have a transcript available to you on the test. It's just today for our analysis activity. I wanted you to be able to see the words. But again, we have to remind ourselves that the raters too will never have a transcript of what you're saying. It's only for study purposes today. But as we listen to this response, we are going to analyze all 4 areas, all 4 dimensions. So we're going to talk about the content, the vocabulary, the listenability, as well as the task fulfillment. But as the first dimension I really want you to focus on, please, is the listenability. So try to assess whether this woman is speaking clearly. Is her pronunciation easy to understand? Try to detect any pauses or corrections or interjections that might be negatively affecting that speech. All right, so let's take a listen now.
I really do think that people nowadays spend too much time on their cell phones. There are many things to do on the cell phone. You could use this as a radio. You could use it as a information spot. You could check so many things on your cell phone. Now you could even watch TV in your cell phone. So people are using it for maybe simplifying their lives. They do not have to move a lot to do stuff because they have their cell phone, so they could do it right there. Even paying bills, you could do it through your cell phone. You do not have to go to the bank, for example. You could pay things online. You could do many things with your cell phone. So people are using it a lot nowadays.
Oh, okay. So I'm hoping that you heard that response.
It is a source
Okay.
of music.
Swati, can you give me a thumbs up if it went okay?
I'm just trying to see if people heard it right, and I can't. I'm not able to get any information from my end. So, hey guys, just let me know if you were able to hear that properly. I know we had some voice issues last time, so I just want to make sure that it was audible. Just let me know. I'm talking to the viewers here. Yeah, so if you could hear that, just let us know and we can move ahead. Okay, so it looks like you were able to hear it, so I'm just going to let Brandy continue. Thank you for letting me know, guys.
All right, thanks everyone. Again, I wanted to double check you could hear that clearly because we did have some sound issues last time. So thank you for giving us that positive feedback. Wonderful. So this woman, I'm going to suggest her pronunciation was quite clear. There was no trouble whatsoever with any of the individual words that she was saying. We could hear them all. Her intonation was also quite natural. So there was a rising tone and a falling tone. We knew when one idea was finishing and the next was starting. Her pauses were minimal. She didn't stop too often throughout that response, and she didn't correct herself too often either. I think maybe we all do this a little bit here and there, but provided we don't do that too often, it's not a problem. And I think she handled all of these elements of listenability quite strongly. There's one thing, though, that was quite a problem for her under listenability. I'm hoping that you noticed all of the interjections that she made. So there were lots of all the way through the response, and it really started to affect the flow or the rhythm. So overall, her listenability was strong, but she certainly needs to practice interjecting less in order to create a stronger overall response there. Now, the next element that we're going to look at is content. So remember, these people were asked to give their opinions. So our speaker here correctly asserts her opinion right in the first line, which is great. She says, I really do think that people nowadays spend too much time on their cell phones. Wonderful. We have a clear opinion, and now we're ready to hear her reasons. So we would expect her to come up with some reasons why she feels this way. But look at the next sentence in her response. She states there are many things to do on the cell phone. And then what follows, if we continue to scan through her transcript, is we see lots of examples of activities that you could do on the cell phone. So for example, she says you could listen to the radio, you could access information or watch TV. She says you can even pay your bills or use it as a source of music and entertainment and knowledge. So she gives that specific example of reading newspapers. So it's nice in a way that she's at least giving activities that can be done on the phone. So she's somewhat addressing the main question, but she hasn't really connected that back to what it is we're doing to spend too much time. That's what she's missing there. So using the phone to complete activities is not quite the same as saying we're spending too much time on the phone. So she needs to get into a deeper discussion and really strengthen her connection or her coherence throughout this response. So her content area is a little bit weaker, one would argue, than her listenability was. She does continue through the response here, the second bolded phrase you can see. She says that people are using the phone to simplify their lives, and she gives the example of paying bills. She even mentions that again in her conclusion at the bottom in purple. She says it really simplifies your way of living. So although that might be true, cell phones maybe do simplify our way of living, simplifying our lives is not quite the same thing as spending too much time on the phone. So once again, you can see how her coherence here is weak. The connection of all of those specific details right back to the main idea is not as strong as it could be. So she certainly has a little bit of work to do in order to improve this dimension of content and coherence. She does some things well, but she needs a deeper dive, that's all. Now, at least under content, the raters also looked for ways that you organize your thoughts. So this is where using connection or transitions rather, and conjunctions can be helpful. So all of these words in red you see on the screen show evidence that this test taker is able to produce some complex sentence structures to connect ideas. At a quick glance, I see the basic conjunctions so, and but. So these are responsible for producing compound structures. But she's also got the word because. She throws in a transition for example. So we have a little bit of variety here with her language at least. And she also has that one great example of complex compound using because and so in the same sentence. So her listenability, again, is probably one of the stronger aspects of this response. And as far as content goes, she at least connects her individual details together. She needs to connect the overall picture more strongly back to that main opinion. Let's move on to vocabulary. So this is your third dimension that the raters are going to look at. So all of the yellow highlighted phrases you see on the screen show really nice examples of how this woman is using precise vocabulary to discuss technology and cell phone usage. She's got some great expressions here. So simplifying their lives, she says, paying bills, through your cell phone, online. She uses that word source very nicely. Straight from your cell phone, devices, and simplifies your way of living. So each of these words not only are precise, so they discuss cell phone usage, they're also accurate. So even her prepositional phrases there, through your cell phone and straight from your cell phone, she's using all of those words correctly to convey meaning. So that's something that the raters would certainly notice. Now, again, with this in mind, there are other areas that she could improve the quality a little bit. So the black underlined expressions you see on the screen show a few imprecise vocabulary words or phrases. So that first one where she says information spot, we know that's not a real term. I think she probably meant information source, right? She uses words like things and stuff. And I'm going to ask all of you listening today to never, ever use those words, please, ever in your speaking. Don't use them in your writing. They're very general. They don't really say much at all. So replace those vague words with more specific nouns. You know, even had she said, you don't have to move a lot because you can do activities on your phone, that would have been an improvement. I notice at the end of her response, she makes up an expression that doesn't actually exist. I think her idea discusses how we're really busy. So she says here, a lot of things on your hand. So that's not a true expression, it's imprecise. I think had she just taken out that last phrase, she would have been okay. She's already expressed that there are lots of things to do, which is the idea she was trying to convey. And she does get cut off a little bit at the end anyway, so removing that last phrase would have helped her meet the time there. So as far as task fulfillment goes, I think it's fairly strong. I mean, she speaks for the 90 seconds. Again, she does get cut off, but it is at the end of her concluding statement, so that should not affect the response too badly. Her tone is certainly appropriate. She gives her opinion and she speaks confidently and respectfully all the way through. Her completeness, though, is the weakest part of this dimension. She doesn't fully answer the question, as we've already discussed, because she veers off topic a little to list activities we do on the cell phone, instead of really talking about how we spend too much time on the cell phone. So a couple things to improve upon there. So if we really get into the strengths and weaknesses of her response, this is her specific skill set. This is a summary of what she does well and what she can work on. So we see she's got some clear pronunciation. She's starting to show some complex sentence structure as she speaks, but she interjects too often. So she needs to practice speaking without saying and ah so often. She clearly states her opinion, which is great, but her coherence we know is weak. She needs to connect these ideas, or these details rather, more firmly to that opinion and complete the discussion. Her vocabulary is appropriate. She does use a lot of common words and phrases correctly, but she could certainly maximize her score here by showing a greater range of vocabulary and more precision. So get rid of those general words and be more specific would be one way to do that. Her tone is fine. She speaks more or less for the 90 seconds, so that's okay too, but she doesn't fully or completely address the question. So again, that's one little thing that needs to be adjusted as she moves forward. So that's the end of our first test taker's response, answering the question. We're going to look at a different test taker now who is answering the exact same question. So he's going to talk about, do you think that nowadays people spend too much time on their cell phones? And explain your reasons. So once again, we'll listen through his response, and you've got a transcript in front of you to follow along with. We will talk about his listenability first because it will be freshest in your minds, and then we will also look at the other three dimensions. And we're really now trying to compare it back to the woman's response. We want to see what he does better and also what he needs to work on in comparison to what we heard the woman perform. All right, let's take a listen, please, to sample response 2 and see how it goes. Here we are.
I do think that nowadays people spend too much time on their cell phones. The main reason why they spend too much time on cell phones might be the social media. It's like everyone likes to spend time with their friends, but in reality, you don't get too much time to spend with your friends. But with the emergence of social media, you could spend time with your friends at least virtually. You could converse with them. You could chat with them through messages or like video messages. That's what we have now, and there is a lot of apps coming through with the emergence of Android phones or Apple iPhones, which can be used as a great source of having fun and entertainment and also information. There's like a lot of newspapers which can be accessed on cell phones, which can where you could read the newspapers in the traditional way. You should get the newspaper buy it, but now you don't have to spend money on that, and it's going to be at your fingertip. So that's the main reason I think people spend too much time on the phone. It's like a social behavior. That's what the cell phone companies are taking advantage of. So they spend more time on the phone, and it's like their virtual friend, which could help them connect with their real friends.
Okay, so it looks like we have heard that. So, Brandy, you can continue.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the signal here so we know our viewers can correctly hear what we want them to hear. Okay, this man does convey his message. We'll start with that. His pronunciation was fairly clear, but there were a couple of minor problems, just minor, and I'll just point them out only to compare it against that first response. So the two black words you see in the middle of the screen were mispronounced slightly. The first word, messages, our test taker stressed that word in the middle. So this is a mistake. He says messages. I think most of us would still understand what he was saying because we know he's talking about cell phones anyway, but it is just a little minor correction he could make to improve that pronunciation. The second word, apps, the vowel sound is not fully formed, so he pronounces this word as ops. So again, just a minor thing. So this is an example of what in level 9, we sometimes have minor pronunciation errors. Those are two little ones. They wouldn't affect his score overall because as you see, they're quite small, but they are there. So I wanted to point them out. More serious mistakes though are made throughout the listenability section for this man. So the pink words on the screen that you're looking at are examples of repetitions and self-corrections that this man is making. And he does it a little too much to the point where it's starting to affect the rhythm of his speech. So we look at the word friends, he says that twice. And then he says, converse with them. So he's caught his mistake and he adds in that preposition. He repeats again, Android. And the worst example of, we get accessed on, and he continues. So sometimes I think when we get nervous, maybe we repeat ourselves, I don't know, but this is something that the man certainly would want to practice at home for more fluency so he can speak more confidently from beginning to end. So we don't want all of those self-corrections and the stopping and starting. There were some interjections, just like we heard in the woman's response, but more noticeable than the interjections are the pace or the speed at which this man speaks. He tends to rush a little bit too quickly through certain sections of the response. So I don't know if you noticed it as you were listening, but this man has a tendency to speak in what we call run-on sentences. So he takes about 3 or even 4 different ideas and he just sort of combines them all into one long idea. And these are the black sections that you're looking at right now on the screen. So for example, that first one reads, you could converse with them. You could chat with them through messages or video messages. That's what we have now. And he continues. So he actually has 3 different sentences there, and he's combined them all into one long sentence. So remember, the raters are not going to have a transcript of your ideas. So by blending all of these ideas together, it's hard for the listener to understand fully when one idea has finished and the other idea has started. So the speed at which he's speaking makes his intonation less discernible, or it could cause confusion. That second example is a better example of how much he rushes. So I'll just read this out aloud and you'll see what I mean. He says, there's like a lot of newspapers which can be accessed on cell phones, where you could read the newspapers, like in the traditional way. You should get the newspaper, buy it. And he continues. So it's almost like he's got so many ideas to get out that he just sort of rushes them all together. We don't want you to do that. We want a very clear evidence of complete sentence structure all the way through the response. All right, even in this man's concluding statement, we've got another run-on sentence. He says, it's like social behavior. That's what the cell phone company is taking advantage of. And he continues. So less rushing and better intonation, I think there would be helpful. So overall, his listenability is much weaker than the listenability we heard from the woman in the first response. Remember, these are both level 9 test takers, but they earn their score in a different way. Now into content, this man also gives his opinion right in the beginning, which is exactly what we want you to do. So he says, I would think that nowadays people spend too much time on their cell phones. So great, he even has the same opinion as our first speaker, and that's fine. So remember, we'd expect now the rest of our response to give reasons why people spend too much time. And this man continues, he says, the main reason why they spend too much time on cell phones might be social media. The next part of his response here actually does suggest a cause and effect relationship that might explain why we're on our phone more often. So I'll read aloud what he says here, and we'll make sure we understand how that connection's being made. He says, everyone likes to spend time with their friends, but in reality, you don't get much time to spend with your friends. But with social media, you can spend time with them, at least virtually. He even goes on to give a few specific examples about how we could use social media in order to connect. So he talks about conversing and chatting with friends, using messages and video messages and apps. So he's not just listing how we could use the phone. That's what the woman did in the first response. He is suggesting it's because we really want to spend time with each other, and we can connect virtually through that phone. That's why we're on the phone so much, is sort of the essence of that response. So we could argue here that his coherence, his connection of his ideas is made a little more strongly back to that main opinion. He's actually taking a bit of time to give a deeper analysis as to the reasons why we're on the phone, rather than just listing a bunch of activities to be done. Now, with that being said, this man does make actually the same mistake that the woman did in the first response. He does go on to speak about how the phone can be used as an entertainment and information source. And he also gives the example of reading newspapers, which is exactly what the woman did earlier. What we'd like this man to do to really, again, emphasize or strengthen that connection to spending too much time is maybe he could have said, because all of this information is so easily accessible, we have our noses buried in the phone and we're no longer connecting with our friends and family at home in the real world. So there is definitely areas for him to improve, to fully extend that discussion and strengthen that connection. So they both, I think, response 1 and 2 show improvements needed, but I would argue that the man's response does give a deeper discussion, primarily when you look at his first reasoning with social media. So again, different approaches. 2 level 9 speakers, one who accomplishes this task a little bit more strongly than the other one. Now his connections and transitions are similar to what we saw in the woman. He's also using but, so, and. So he's got some compound sentences emerging. So this will count for his content. So we are showing a little bit of complexity there. As far as the sentence structure goes, though, we know that the woman had the stronger response in that area. This man makes too many run-on sentence mistakes as compared to the woman who spoke in very clear and complete sentence structure. So lots of similarities and differences, even within that one dimension. Let's focus next on this man's vocabulary. So all of those yellow terms that you see on the screen show evidence of really nicely connected, precise words. All of these words talk about cell phone and technology use, and they're used correctly. So he's got words like social media, in reality, emergence of, virtually, converse with them, chat and video messages, apps, great source, accessed on, at your fingertip. What a fantastic expression. Social behavior and taking advantage of. So vocabulary here is strong, definitely stronger than we saw in the first response. This man has a couple of imprecise expressions that I would like for him to improve. These are the black underlined phrases in the middle. And you'll notice that most of these phrases, he's using that word like, or like, there's like in the traditional way. I think he's using the word like as an interjection. So if he could stop doing that, his response there, the vocab, would become a little more accurate. But overall, when you just look at the sheer number of very precise words he's demonstrating in yellow and how well they support his topic, I would definitely say his vocabulary usage is noticeably stronger than we saw from the woman in response 1. His task fulfillment is almost the same, really, as response 1. He speaks for the 90 seconds almost perfectly. He doesn't get cut off, so that's nice. His tone is appropriate as well. He does address the question for part of the response, but we've already looked at how in the end of his response, he could certainly connect ideas more strongly to spending too much time on the phone. So task fulfillment is maybe just a little bit more complete than we saw in the first one. So in summary, we know that I tried to say something positive about his listenability. I would say his volume was fine, right? He spoke at a good volume, but a lot of his listenability he needs to work on. So correct those few pronunciation errors, try to slow the speech, don't blend all those sentences together, try not to repeat or interject so much. That was, I'd say, one of the weaker parts of his overall response. He does, though, clearly state his opinion, and he demonstrates some evidence of coherence. He just needs to do that more consistently throughout the rest of the response. His vocabulary is fine, it's context specific. There's a couple of unnatural phrases that he could take out, but overall, he's done well with vocabulary. Again, appropriate tone, great use of time. Some of his details address the task, but the task is not always addressed completely throughout the end of the response. So again, a little bit of improvement needed there for him too. So remember, we said both of these responses achieved a level 9. So they both demonstrate some evidence of some complex details emerging. We looked at some of the complex structures that both of them created with the grammar and also their vocabulary. But these responses earned that level 9 in very different ways. So the woman in the first response definitely spoke much more clearly. Her listenability was stronger overall, even with accurate complex sentence structures there. So she didn't make many, if any, grammatical errors within the sentence structure. But her content and coherence was weaker. She didn't address the task fully or completely. The second response, though, the man certainly spoke in a very rushed manner, and his pronunciation and sentence structure were more noticeably weak than the woman's was. But his vocabulary was a lot stronger. His coherence was more developed, and as such, he more fully addressed the task. Okay, so I'm hoping that the takeaway we all have from looking at these two responses today is to understand that we all of us at home, have our own strengths and weaknesses that we bring to the table. So when you perform on test day and give your responses, it's the combination of how all 4 of those skills work together to give your response that's going to earn you the score. So there are many different ways then to earn the same level score on the CELPIP test. All right, so that concludes my little presentation for you today. I will stop sharing my screen now. And if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them for you now.
Hi, Brandy. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. But I just wanted to let the viewers know that we wanted to play the sample response once more of the first one because I think we weren't able to play it fully the last time. So don't worry, we will play it from here. But just wanted to let you know before we get into the questions.
Start speaking now.
I really do think that people nowadays spend too much time on their cell phones. There are many things to do on the cell phone. You could use this as a radio. You could use it as a information spot. You could check so many things on your cell phone. Now you could even watch TV in your cell phone. So people are using it for maybe simplifying their lives. They do not have to move a lot to do stuff because they have their cell phone, so they could do it right there. Even paying bills, you could do it through your cell phone. You do not have to go to the bank, for example. You could pay things online. You could do many things with your cell phone. So people are using it a lot nowadays. It is a source of music. It is a source of entertainment. It is a source of knowledge too. Now you could even read your newspaper straight from your cell phone. So people rely a lot on their devices, maybe too much sometimes, but it really simplifies your way of living and you take on your day, especially if you have a lot of things to do and a lot of things on your hand. So it's a very good way of.
Okay, great. Thank you for waiting, Brandy. So I think people are still asking their questions, but I have one for you that I had from our last video, which was one of our test takers were asking about how many mistakes that they can do before they lose a level or gain a level, or if there isn't any set amount of mistakes or errors that they can do.
Okay, thanks. Yes, that is a very good question. It's a very common question. We get asked all the time, and for good reason. You all want to know exactly how to improve your score. There is no magic formula. There is no set or specific number of mistakes that the raters are going to look at. So they're never going to say, okay, this person made 4 verb tense errors, that's acceptable. Oh, 5 errors, too much, down a level. That's never going to happen. So really what it boils down to is what you can demonstrate as far as what your skill set allows you to do with all those skills together. So maybe instead of saying, how many mistakes am I allowed? Can we rephrase that and turn it around and say, how can I best demonstrate the best skill sets that I have? So let's look at how all of my strengths are going to work together to demonstrate what I can do. So look at it as adding these skills together to get your score instead of subtracting little mistakes away from the score. That's how the raters, I'm hoping, would address it too. So I want to reassure you in the sense that it's not a certain number of mistakes. It's never going to be the issue. It's how well you're able to communicate your meaning with all of those 4 dimensions together. I hope that helps.
Thank you. That was a great response. And a lot of thank yous today for this wonderful session. Trupti is asking if we could do more sessions like this, especially for tasks 3 and 4. Trupti, we will certainly take that suggestion into consideration. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you for joining us, Brandy, today.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Trupti. Nice to see you back on our webinars.
Great. Okay, guys, that was a wonderful session. But now we will be going to our news updates. We will resume tests in multiple places by May 22nd. Test centers in Manitoba, Calgary, Winnipeg will all start administering tests, CELPIP tests from May 22nd. So if you are interested to get updates for those specific locations, please enter your email ID in our notification bar on our website. I know I say this many times, but it is important. It is the golden notification bar that you see as soon as you log into celpip.ca. And if you don't see the golden bar, it's probably because you closed it before or you've already entered your email ID in it. So what you can do is repeat the process in incognito mode in your browser. For those of you who are not sure what incognito mode is, I would recommend entering that phrase in Google. So search incognito mode plus your browser, incognito mode for Safari, incognito mode for Chrome, and you will be able to find steps to do that. And I also want to address the people who are waiting for test centers to open in their province or their country. We are working very hard to get tests running, but we also have to follow safety procedures set by those provinces and countries. So I urge you to keep checking our COVID-19 page on our website, celpip.ca, where you will get the most updated information. Okay, and for those of you testing this week, as always, I wish you all the luck, but I also wanted to remind you that masks are now mandatory. As we resume testing in many locations, we want to do all that it takes to keep our test takers safe. So masks have now become mandatory. You can either bring a surgical mask or a cloth face covering, whatever works for you, but you will have to wear that during the entire time of your test. Now, I know that a few people have reached out to us on social media wondering how they're speaking and how their voice will be affected because of the masks. So I wanted to reassure you that our test ops has tested this out. They've worn masks and they've tested out their volume and their voices to make sure that you are audible. But also, you can test it too. In the beginning of your test, you will be allowed to test your microphone with your masks to make sure that your voice is audible. So you can either adjust the settings or your voice and until you're comfortable. So yes, we are doing everything we can to make sure that you have a good and safe test. If you already wrote your test, I want to tell you that you can now send in your online reports. You don't have to wait for a physical copy to come to you. Your PDFs, your online PDFs will be accepted by IRCC, ICCRC, and RECBC. So that is a great update for you. Lastly, I want to remind you that practice tests are still 25% off. If you haven't downloaded, today is the day for you to download it. Please go ahead and do so. I have put the link in the description below. And if you're also curious to see the previous episode that Brandy made of our speaking responses, that is in the description below as well. And so that's it for updates. If you have any questions about the masks, about 25% off, about anything, please ask us in the comments below and we will help you out. For our next episode, this Friday, we will be back with Canada Visa. If you didn't already know, Canada Visa had joined us last month to talk to us about immigration. If you're interested in looking at that video, it is in the description below as well. But if you're interested in joining this episode, please do so on Friday, the 15th. So please set your reminders for this Friday. I am looking forward to meeting you all then. Again, as always, if you have any specific questions, please send in your questions to communications@paragontesting.ca, or you can also engage with us on our social media. Our Facebook and Instagram is updated with the latest news. We will also be posting regular reminders and countdowns for CELPIP Live over there. So if you cannot make it to live here, you will be able to set your reminders on our Instagram account. So please follow us there as well. But as always, I thank you for being here, and I ask that you subscribe to our channel and please share this video with anybody you might think might find it useful. This series was made for you all, so please also leave suggestions of what you would like to see next. But until this Friday, I thank you for being here, and I hope you wash your hands. Bye.